Hello, everybody. My name is Michelle Jones, and I would love to welcome you to today's workshop. It's a pleasure to have each and every one of you here. I would also like to introduce you to our PhD nutritionist, Dr. Diana Fleming. Welcome, Diana.
Thank you, Michelle, and welcome to everybody.
So glad to have you here today talking to us about better blood sugar control. I think this is such an important topic, and I'm so excited to learn more today. I would also like to welcome everybody to Amy Hannes. Amy usually does all of our back end technology help. And so, Amy, welcome.
Thank you. So glad to be here. So glad to be here with all of you today. Just remember, this is technology. We know you're joining us technology. We're using technology. If we do happen to pop off, give us a second to join back in. Thankfully, we're joining kind of from different places, so you shouldn't lose all of us. But if you have issues connecting, one of the best things you can do is one, use the Chrome browser. And then two is you can just simply refresh your screen. Sometimes it just needs a little refresh if you can't hear us or see us that well. So those are two important things to remember. The other thing, and I see many people have already found it, is our chat section. So go ahead, say hello, tell us where you're joining us from. And that is the place that you can ask your questions. We will have a Q&A time at the end to answer as many of those questions that we possibly can during that time frame. So that is where you can put those. I'll flag those so that we can kind of go through those. So glad to be here today. And also, I'll have a handout to share at the end of the presentation. So it'll kind of be a good overview of kind of what we have gone through. We'll also have a recording. We do record these and share these with all the members in our Full Plate Living membership, which Michelle will tell a little bit about at the end. So we know that not everyone can join us live at this time. So we definitely want to be able to share more of this information afterwards. So glad to be here. Glad to have you here.
Thank you so much, Amy. I think you've covered everything. So at this time, Diana, I'm going to turn things over to you. Let's get started.
All right, so the talk is entitled Better Blood Sugar. So when people think of blood sugar, they most often think of diabetes, right? It's a sugar problem. And it is a problem in this country because diabetes is actually the 7th leading cause of death. There's about 88 million adults in this country. That's approximately 1 in 3 who have pre-diabetes. This is not full-blown diabetes, but the conditions are working their way toward being a diabetic in the body. So if a person that has pre-diabetes does nothing in 3 to 5 years, let's say these 88 million people did nothing, in 3 to 5 years, a quarter of them would develop full-blown diabetes. If they did nothing by 10 years, 70% of that 88 million would be diabetics. And then we have another 34.2 million Americans approximately, that's just over 1 in 10 who have diabetes. And the majority of that is type 2 diabetes, approximately 95%. So what we're going to focus on in this talk today is type 2 diabetes and pre-diabetes. So before we get into it in more detail, there are 3 important considerations that we want to share with you. First, if you are under medical supervision for any reason, please consult with your doctor before following any of the lifestyle recommendations that we share with you in this presentation. Secondly, if you suspect that you may have prediabetes or you may have type 2 diabetes, but you've never been professionally diagnosed, please work with your physician to get the appropriate tests done. And third, the focus of this presentation is prediabetes and type 2 diabetes, as I already mentioned. And the lifestyle recommendations made here today, they can be helpful to someone that is a type 1 diabetic, but please consult with your physician or your diabetes care team before implementing any of these lifestyle recommendations. All right. What is type 2 diabetes? Well, very simply, it is hyperglycemia. Hyper means high, gly refers to glucose or blood sugar, emia means in the blood. So basically, someone with type 2 diabetes has high blood sugar. They have too much sugar in their blood. And a traditional way of diagnosing this is with a fasting blood sugar. And this is measured when you haven't eaten or drunk anything with calories for at least 8 hours. So if you have your fasting blood sugar measured, normal blood sugar would be 100 milligrams per deciliter, less than that, less than 100 milligrams per deciliter. That would be a normal fasting blood sugar. If you're pre-diabetic, your fasting blood sugar would be 100 to 125 milligrams per deciliter. And if you are a type 2 diabetic, it would be 126 milligrams per deciliter or higher. Insulin resistance is the cause of hyperglycemia or high blood sugar. What is insulin resistance? We're going to talk about that in a minute. But first, it's important to consider what the risk factors are for type 2 diabetes. What are risk factors? These are situations, conditions in your life that if you have them, they increase the risk or the chances of you having type 2 diabetes. Now we know that genes play a role. Genes play a role in almost everything, but in type 2 diabetes, the evidence suggests that role is very small. Research actually shows that type 2 diabetes is largely preventable, and it's sometimes even reversible. So it has been called a lifestyle disease because there are things in our lifestyle habits that cause type 2 diabetes. So the single most important cause of it is excess weight. The single most important cause is excess weight. So if somebody is overweight, they have a 7-fold increased risk of developing type 2 diabetes. If they are obese, they have a 20 to 40-fold increased risk compared to somebody who's at a healthy weight. The second major cause of type 2 diabetes is eating an unhealthy diet, which would be the standard American diet. We're going to talk about this in a minute. And the standard American diet has been abbreviated SAD. Other risk factors for type 2 diabetes are lack of physical activity and smoking. So I think we're all aware of the fact that we have an obesity epidemic in this country, in America. And so what I want to do is show you a series of slides looking at the prevalence of obesity in the states of the United States of America. And that's what you're seeing right here is a map of the United States. These prevalence rates or this data comes from a survey that has been distributed since 1985. I believe that's when the CDC started this, tracking the prevalence of obesity in this country, state by state. So what we're going to do is I'm going to flip through really quickly the last 10 years from 2011 to 2020. And just to give you a quick idea of the color coordination here, green is the lowest prevalence. Less than 20% of adults in that state have obesity or are obese. Yellow is 20 to 24.9, orange is 25 to 20.9, and then darker burgundy is above that. So basically, the darker the color, the higher the prevalence of adult obesity. So this is for 2011. Here's 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020. So we can see a clear trend of increasing obesity all across this country. And here's the sobering thing, as this obesity epidemic has been increasing, so has the type 2 diabetes epidemic been increasing. In fact, they've been going together, increasing hand in hand. And they are so much interconnected that researchers and scientists have created a term for this called diabesity. In other words, they've taken the beginning of the word diabetes and the end of the word obesity and put them together. Why do they do this? Here's the very simple reason why. Obesity is caused by eating too much of the wrong kinds of foods. I think we can all appreciate that fact. Type 2 diabetes is caused by insulin resistance, which I just mentioned. Insulin resistance is caused by eating too much of the wrong kinds of foods. So we can see that these two epidemics are connected and growing together. And here's a little graphic that illustrates this. When someone is obese, this increases insulin resistance. When someone is insulin resistant, their blood sugars go up, and then their insulin levels go up. Both high blood sugars and high insulin levels contribute to obesity. And so we have a vicious cycle of these two diseases increasing together. So what is insulin resistance? I want to give you a very, very simple explanation. This blue circle sphere actually represents a cell of the body. We have trillions of them. And all of these cells in our body need energy to do all the thousands and thousands of things they do. And that energy is glucose. It is a sugar molecule, otherwise known as blood sugar. And in order for the cell to have the energy, that glucose needs to get from our bloodstream into the cell, and it does that by going through a little channel. So the channel opens up and the glucose goes into the cell, and now the cells can use it for energy to do all the things they do. But in order for the glucose to get into the cell, insulin plays a role. So insulin has to bind to a little protein on the cell like a dock. And once it does that, that glucose channel comes to the surface, opens up, and lets the glucose inside. So the dock is called an insulin receptor, where the insulin binds. All right, so this graphic, the top part of it shows you what I just explained. The beta cells in the pancreas produce the insulin, secrete it into the bloodstream carries it all throughout the body. And you can see on the top part of the graphic, the insulin has bound to its receptor. The little channel for the glucose opens up, and boop, the glucose goes inside the cell. That's how things are supposed to work under normal conditions. But what we have in insulin resistance is illustrated simply in the bottom part of this graphic. We see that the insulin receptor is blocked. It's like, something's on top of it, so the insulin can't get there. So the glucose is outside the cell, so it's building up in the bloodstream. That sends a message to the brain. The brain says, hey, pancreas, you need to make more insulin because the glucose is not getting inside the cell. So the pancreas chugs out more insulin. And so we've got blood sugar levels increasing and insulin levels increasing, but that poor insulin's receptor is blocked up, so the insulin can't get in and the sugar can't get in. So in the simplest of terms, that's what insulin resistance is. What do we do about this? Well, Dr. Neil Barnard, he's one of the leading researchers on type 2 diabetes, and he made this statement: in order to turn around the course of diabetes, he said, quote, we need to clean the gum out of the locks. In other words, whatever is gumming up the insulin receptors, we need to fix that and clean them up. So, the next question would be, how do you do that? How do you clean those gummed up insulin receptors, clean out those locks? Well, this is what we want to share with you today. 5 powerful but simple strategies for helping you clean out those insulin receptors and begin to turn the course of type 2 diabetes around. So, number 1 is to eat a high fiber diet. Eat lots of fiber foods. So on the right side of the slide, you can see we want to move over time from the standard American diet, abbreviated SAD, to a high fiber diet. So first, I'm going to talk to you briefly about what characterizes a standard American diet. Then I'm going to talk to you about what characterizes a high fiber diet. So here's the basic characteristics of the standard American diet. It is high in saturated fat. It is high in added sugars. It is low in fiber, and generally, because it is low in fiber, there's a very low intake of foods that contain fiber, like fruits, vegetables, whole grains, beans. And because of all that I just mentioned, there are generally inadequate intakes of various vitamins and minerals and antioxidants and phytochemicals, all these micronutrients that we need to be healthy. There's generally inadequate intakes in the standard American diet. So what are the foods that create this situation? I'm going to flip through pictures that show you these foods, but I want to make this important point. It's not that people eating the standard American diet occasionally have these types of foods. These foods make up the majority of what people eat on the standard American diet from meal to meal, from day to day. So here are the foods: highly processed convenient foods, fried foods, fast foods, refined grains. That means grains that are not whole. They have fiber missing, they have nutrients missing. So think about white flour products, white bread, white rolls, white buns, white pizza crust, white rice, white pasta, bakery goods with white flour. So lots of refined grains, sweets of all kinds, sugar sweetened beverages of all kinds, which would include alcohol, and then dairy products, especially emphasis on high-fat dairy, butter, cheese, as well as eggs. Red meats, beef, pork, and lamb in various forms, and processed meats, bacon, deli meats, pepperonis, sausage, hot dogs, ham in various forms. So those are the foods that encompass somebody on the standard American diet. What is a high fiber diet? A high fiber diet is a plant predominant diet. The reason that is true is because fiber is only naturally found in plant foods. So a high fiber diet is going to be composed largely of whole, unprocessed plant foods. It will be low in saturated fats because these foods are low in saturated fats. It will be low in added sugars because these foods do not have added sugars. It'll be high in fiber because these foods are loaded with fiber, and there will be a high intake of fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and beans. And because of that, there is an abundant supply in this type of eating with vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, and phytochemicals. These are all the micronutrients that we need to be healthy. So what are the foods that are characteristic of this high fiber plant predominant diet? Here we go. Beans and legumes. Lots of beans and legumes. And I want to say that when it comes to optimizing blood sugars, think of beans and legumes as your BFF, your best friends forever. Now, beans get a bad rap because they do have starch. And that starch is actually good. It provides energy. But what beans are king of is they have a lot of fiber and a lot of protein. Those two things combined together, plus the fact that they are low fat, makes them amazing for keeping blood sugar levels down at the meal you eat them and the next meal as well. It's called the second meal effect. So when you eat beans at a meal, and you at the next meal as well, even if you eat food that spikes your blood sugar will be lower because you had beans at the previous meal. So beans, great for optimizing blood sugar. Vegetables are also marvelous for optimizing blood sugar, especially the non-starchy ones. Green beans, tomatoes, cucumbers, onions, broccoli, all the dark leafies, cabbage, carrots. You can almost eat these without limits. These foods are marvelous for optimizing blood sugar, also low fat and loaded with vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, and phytochemicals. And there are fruits that are great for better blood sugar, and we want to tell you which ones these are. All fruits are nice, but there are some that are super beneficial for blood sugar. The berries, unsweetened berries, both fresh and frozen, strawberries, blackberries, raspberries, wonderful for better blood sugars, as well as fruits with cores. So that would be your apples and pears. Fruits with pits, that would be your plums, nectarines, peaches, fresh apricots. And then whole citrus fruit, not juice, but whole citrus, lemons, limes, oranges, grapefruits. And then, believe it or not, grains are actually wonderful for optimizing blood sugars as long as they have fit these three criteria. First, they need to be whole grains, not refined, not the white stuff that we just talked about. They need to have all their fiber, and that would mean they have all their nutrients. So first, they need to be whole grains. Second, they need to be cooked in water or liquid. So cooked whole grains. Think of brown rice. Think of steel-cut oats. Think of quinoa. When they're cooked in water, this helps to optimize blood sugar. So you're eating cooked whole grains. And then the third characteristic of whole grains in order to optimize blood sugar is larger particle size. So let me take a minute to explain this. You can see this clearly illustrated in this picture. If you go from left to right in the top and bottom row, you're going to see that the particle size of the whole grains goes from big to small. So oat groats are whole oats. Only the indigestible hull has been removed, so you have the whole oat groat seed. And you can cook that. It makes an amazing hot cereal. That because the particles are bigger, they digest slower. That means glucose goes into your bloodstream more slowly, avoiding those big spikes after eating, say, lots of refined grains. So oat groats are great. The next one there is steel cut oats. These are oat groats that have been sliced into several pieces. Those are also good for better blood sugar. Scottish oats are smaller pieces. Oat bran, of course, is just the bran. If you look at the bottom row, you have old-fashioned oats, rolled oats, then quick oats, instant oat flour. And you can see the old-fashioned rolled oats have bigger particles than the quick, instant, and oat flour. So old-fashioned oats are your best bet for best blood sugars. And this next slide actually gives you a list of the best ones. Quinoa is wonderful because it has more fiber and protein and less starch than, say, brown rice. Pearl barley, farro, wheat, and rye berries, they're the whole grains, and they cook up to make a wonderful, chewy, whole grain cereal. Wheat bulgur is great. Black and wild rice are better for better blood sugars than brown rice, but brown rice is better than white rice. Whole oat groats, which I just showed you in the previous slide, steel cut oats, old-fashioned oats, and overnight oats. Believe it or not, research shows overnight oats can help with blood sugar control as long as, don't miss this point, don't soak the oats in fruit juice or any milk that has added sugar. So if you're using a plant milk, it should not be sweetened with sugar. If you're using cow's milk, 1% or skim is better.
So Diana, before we move away from that slide, I just wanted to clarify once again that we're talking about the whole grains, not flour made from these things. Particle size is very important.
Right.
So you want to keep the big particles of food. If you're using quinoa flour, it's probably going to spike your blood sugars. You want to eat actual quinoa cooked in water, correct?
Great. That is great. And you know, the smaller the particle, the more rapidly that is digested and the more quickly the glucose goes into your bloodstream. So if a lot of grain gets digested rapidly, you got a lot of sugar going into your bloodstream, which is going to spike your blood sugar. And thank you, Michelle, for emphasizing that. Nuts and nut butters are actually beneficial, healthy fat for optimizing blood sugars. And now we're going to actually give you some guidelines as to quantities that you want to work your way toward eating every day. So, and this is a goal, right? This doesn't happen overnight, but we're giving you the goal to work toward. Work toward eating 1 cup to 1.5 cups of cooked beans, any kind of bean. You can break that up. You could have a cup at one meal, a half a cup at another, or a half a cup at each meal. But a great goal is 1 to 1.5 cups cooked beans, 1 cup raw or 2 cups cooked greens of your choice. Mix these up. Don't just have spinach. Kale, collards, Swiss chard, all kinds of dark leafies. They're wonderful for optimizing blood sugar. 2 cups of other vegetables, any other vegetables. These can be cooked and or raw. And then you want to have 2 to 3 whole fruits a day. Focus on the ones we showed you the pictures of, the berries, the apples, pears, peaches, nectarines, plums, and then whole citrus fruits. And then 1 cup of cooked whole grains. 1 cup of cooked whole grains is a great amount to focus on per day. And remember the ones that we just went over. And then when it comes to nuts and nut butters, 1/4 cup of nuts a day or 2 tablespoons of nut butter. Not both, but either or. So if you're going to have a 1/4 cup of nuts, skip the nut butter. If you're going to have the nut butter, skip the nuts. And if you buy nut butters, try to avoid the ones that have added sugar or fat. And then finally, you know, everybody likes bread, generally speaking. So we have found that the best bread for the best blood sugars is Ezekiel 4:9 bread. This bread is really good for optimizing blood sugars because it doesn't use flour. It uses sprouted grains. And here's the amazing thing about it. It has 2 sprouted beans in it. So now it has the added benefit of the fiber and protein in the beans. So a slice of Ezekiel 4:9 bread can help optimize blood sugars. So here's what graphically illustrated or visually illustrated very simply. What we're encouraging you to do is go from the plate on the left to the plate on the right. So what we see in the plate on the left, for the standard American diet, 75% of that plate has no fiber or very little fiber. The foods that are eaten are no or low fiber foods. And only about 25% of the plate are foods that have fiber. So that's the typical standard American diet plate. We want you to flip that around and go to a high fiber plate. And in that case, 75% of what you're going to eat is going to be the whole unprocessed fiber foods. And only 25% of the plate will be foods that have no fiber. All right, so moving on to tip number 2, you want to drink enough water. And here are the liquids that you want to break up with. In other words, eventually get a divorce from. Limit these, omit these. And here's the reason why: coffee or tea with added sugars and or fat like oil and cream. These do not give optimum blood sugars because of the added sugar and the fat. And by the way, the commercial creamers often use partially hydrogenated oils, which have trans fat, which is not helpful for optimizing blood sugars. So if you're going to have coffee or tea, drink it black. Soft drinks, of course, is a no-brainer. They're loaded with sugar. They spike blood sugars. Juice and juice drinks, even if it's 100% juice, it still spikes blood sugar because all the fiber is gone. I mean, think about it. When somebody's blood sugar goes down, they have a hypoglycemic episode, what do they drink to get it up quickly? Fruit juice.
Yeah.
So you want to omit the fruit juice and juice drinks. Sports drinks are sweetened generally. And then alcohol also is not optimal for optimal blood sugars. If you choose to use one of these drinks, make it the 25% part of the plate. Remember, because it has no fiber. How much water should you drink? Well, here we're going to give you some tips, but what's important to know is that fiber, as it moves through your digestive system, it loves water. It loves to take water from the digestive tract to itself. That's what enables fiber to do all the things that it does. So what we need to do is replenish the water that the fiber takes by drinking more water. So we're replenishing our water systemically. So here's a general goal to aim for: 8-ounce glasses of water throughout the day. Don't drink a whole bunch of water, just a couple times, but try to stay well hydrated throughout the day. And an easy way to gauge whether you're hydrated enough is to look at the color of your urine. That's a key. And the key is to keep it pale yellow. And I don't know if you know this or not, but regularly drinking water and staying well hydrated helps you to actually lower your blood sugar levels and keep them within a more normal range. Now, people often say, oh, I'm not in the water habit. I don't know how to get into the habit. Here are 3 tips. And I'm sure there's many more tips than this. But the first big obvious tip is to keep a water bottle with you throughout the day. If you've got a water bottle with you, then you're much more likely to pick it up and drink the water, right? Secondly, when that water bottle is empty, refill it. Because if you empty that water bottle sitting wherever you are and it's empty, you're much less likely, if you're busy, to get up and fill it and then drink. So keep your water bottle full. And if you don't like the taste of water, and that's often a common challenge, you can add lemon or lime slices, and it gives it a beautiful, delicious hint of flavor. In fact, that's one of my favorite things to do. Hey, Michelle, do you have any other tips on water drinking?
I think those are really, really good. I think the important one that I would mention is that each person's different. If somebody's sweating a lot through exercise or because they're in a very, very warm climate, they're going to need more water than that. If males usually need more water than females. So it is very important to pay attention to the color of your urine. And I have gotten to the point, because drinking water is a problem sometimes even for me, to where I carry my water bottle everywhere. It's almost like my purse. If it's not with me, I feel like I'm missing something. So create that relationship with your water bottle where it's an extension of who you are. That'll make it easier.
Yes, absolutely. That's wonderful. And, just to mention something that in light of what Michelle said, thirst is not a reliable indicator of water need. So by the time people are thirsty, they've already been dehydrated a certain amount. So don't go by your thirst, go by the color of your urine. Good. Okay, tip number 3 is to get moving. Remember, one of the risk factors for developing type 2 diabetes was lack of physical activity. So there's many benefits to regular physical activity, but to mention a few that have to do with diabetes, when we're physically active, that improves the insulin action, the ability of insulin to do what it needs to do. And of course, it helps to provide better blood sugar control. Physical activity on a regular basis reduces the risk factors for heart disease. Why is this so important? Because heart disease is the #1 killer of people with type 2 diabetes. And then we know that regular physical activity contributes to weight loss. Why is this important? Because the single most important cause of developing type 2 diabetes is excess weight. So physical activity helps with that. And it's very important to be aware of the fact that you want to work with your doctor to manage your blood sugar and or medications if you're on them, if you're going to engage in prolonged physical activity. That would be 30 minutes or more, especially if it's more intense. Definitely need to work with your professional team to make sure you know how to monitor your medications and blood sugar under prolonged physical activity. Now, what is the goal for physical activity? It's the goal actually for all of us, 150 minutes a week. 150 minutes a week of moderate intensity. Moderate intensity means you can talk while you're doing it. And you can break this down any way you want. You could do 30 minutes, 5 days a week. You could do that 30 minutes in 10-minute segments during the day. Here's the reason why. Any amount of time is beneficial. So any amount of time during the day is beneficial, any amount of time during the week. Look, and if you can't meet the 150 minutes, don't worry about it. Do as much as you can and keep moving forward till you reach that goal. So Michelle, what does this Start Small Active 15 challenge mean?
Yeah, so I think like Diana said, it's important to just start where you're at and slowly increase. Sometimes we try to do it all and we get overwhelmed. And so start small. And an example in our community for our members that we do every once in a while is this Active 15 challenge, where we just challenge people to get moving for 15 minutes a day and start there. And they can increase from there, or they can just do 15 minutes. 15 minutes is better than nothing. So encourage you to start small, but keep adding a little bit at a time.
That's great. And then it's important to do what you like to do. If you don't enjoy what you're doing in physical activity, you're going to quit, right? And then you want to mix it up. It doesn't have to be the same thing all the time, because the same thing creates boredom. Boredom creates, I'm not going to do this anymore. And then include a friend or loved one. This is so helpful for accountability, for inspiration. And you know, when I have done physical activity outside with a friend, talking to them, the time just flies by, right? And I want to actually keep going. So if you can have a routine or involve someone you know to do that with you, it's so helpful to keep going. All right, tip number 4 is to stroll after every meal. So what is this about, right? Most people have not heard about this, but if you stroll after you finish eating, this helps to lower your postprandial blood sugar. Post means after, prandial refers to eating. So this is the blood sugar peak that happens after you eat a meal, right? You eat a meal, your blood sugar goes up. You want the peak, the highest point, to be as low as possible, right? So when you finish eating, if you get up and stroll just for 15 or 20 minutes, that is going to help your blood sugar peak to be lower. That actually helps your hemoglobin A1C to be lower. So what is a stroll? A stroll is a leisurely walk. This is not intense. This is not long. It's just actually very enjoyable. Walk in a leisurely manner. Any amount of time will be beneficial. If you can't do 15 minutes, do 5. If you can't do 15, 10, 5. Even if you can do a minute is better than nothing. And what this does, it allows glucose, some glucose, not all glucose, some glucose to enter the cells of your body without insulin. So it's wonderful for helping optimize blood sugars. Number 5 is to stop smoking. This may be a no-brainer, but here's some interesting facts. Smokers have a 30 to 40% higher risk of developing type 2 diabetes. There are 250 known harmful toxic chemicals in cigarette smoke, which increase inflammation and oxidative stress in the body. Both of these increase the risk of developing diabetes. Smoking is associated with an increased risk of abdominal fat, otherwise known as belly fat. This is the fat that goes deeper around our organs. And so smoking actually increases the risk of this, which increases the risk of diabetes. Smoking increases cortisol levels. That's your main stress hormone. When cortisol levels go up, blood sugar levels go up. So we want to keep the cortisol levels down. Smoking makes insulin less effective in doing its job. And smoking increases the risk of diabetic complications. The retinopathy, the eyes, the neuropathy, the nerves, the nephropathy, the kidney damage. So smoking just increases the risk of those serious complications, which we want to avoid. So here's the great news. I love this fact when I learned it. As soon as you set a date to quit and you quit, the benefits start that moment. So as soon as you quit smoking, you start accruing the benefits of quitting. Studies actually show that your insulin can start to become more effective just 8 weeks after you quit, just 8 weeks after you quit. And if you want to do that and quit smoking and you need help, go to smokefree.gov, smokefree.gov. They have all kinds of helpful free resources and information, lots of it. And then, of course, this kind of makes sense. You want to avoid vaping or inhaling any substance which can be toxic to your lungs, because that's going to increase inflammation and oxidative stress, which are associated with increasing the risk of type 2 diabetes. So here's a summary. Eat more high fiber foods, drink enough water, get moving, stroll after every meal, and stop smoking. And we have a handout that you can download to go with that.
Yep, so go ahead and click on handouts at the top. It looks like it's already up for me in the chat, so you can just click on the download button and you can have it on your computer after this, and you can get some of the information that we had in the workshop. As Amy mentioned, we usually do record these, so we will try to have this available afterwards in our membership. And as we are looking at this at the download and we're talking about our membership, I just want to say that one of the most wonderful things about working for the Ardmore Institute of Health, and that's our foundation, is that they have made these programs free. They don't cost anything. There's no hidden fee. You're not going to join and then we're going to ask you for money for anything. It is literally free. All you have to do is go to www.fullplateliving.org and give us your email address to join the membership, and you have access to all of our resources. We have other programs as well, but pertinent to this presentation is this Better Blood Sugar Doable Steps You Can Take Today. That is an actual program that we have, and it walks you through some of the things Diana discussed today. It goes more in depthly with everything that she spoke about, and it covers topics that we haven't even touched today, like the glycemic index and carb choices and how to deal with all of that, because we realize that diabetes is a little bit complicated. So again, go to www.fullplateliving.org and sign up so you can take this class. Like I said, it won't cost you anything. It's just something that is available to you, or if you have a loved one that you care about, send them to the website, tell them, you know what, this is free. You can try it, see what you can learn from it, and apply the lessons from it.
Okay, so what's this mean, Michelle? What's your why?
So anytime that we change habits that we're doing, we can stick to it for a while, especially if we have very good willpower, but none of us have willpower that's impenetrable. At some point, we start to give up, or it becomes too much of a disruption to our routine. And so one of the best ways to stick to the changes you're making is to think about and consider why you're doing it. So I encourage you today, or when you have some free time tonight, to take out a piece of paper, a pen, or open up a document and start typing. And imagine that you're having an interview with a 3-year-old. And so ask yourself, why do I want to get better blood sugars? And write down the first answer that pops into your mind. But as soon as you get that answer, look at yourself and say, but why? And what's the answer to that question? Write that down. And again, ask yourself, but why? And you keep asking that but why question until you reach the point where you feel like, okay, that's really the bottom line. That's my true reason why I want to be here. For some of us, it can be that we just don't want to go on the medications that we saw our parents go on or grandparents. Maybe we have gotten some news from the doctor that, we need to worry about amputation or heart attacks in the future, and we want to reduce the risk of that. Maybe we want to be able to play with our grandkids or our children as they get older. We want to be able to travel with them around the world and do various activities that would be limited if we did have diabetes. So I want you to really think about your answer, write it down, and that will be a more rigid motivation that keeps you going when willpower kind of goes off by the wayside.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. So here are the references behind the information that we presented. And that's it. Thank you so much for listening.